Hey everyone. So this time what I have for you is the recording of a podcast that I have joined. It's called Proxified Developer Podcast. We did discuss a nice variety of topics. So I wanted to bring into my YouTube channel here as well for you and keep it as an archive as well, but definitely suggest going out and looking into they're available on Spotify. They have their own YouTube channel. I'm going to put all of the links to the original channel that has all of the, different interviews with different people, obviously. So I'm going to put all of the links below. Go ahead and take a look at. Meanwhile, if you're curious about what I have to say about what's happening around AI, startups, and all that, there goes about 90 minutes of discussion is next. See you around.
Hello and welcome to the Builders Podcast. I'm Lee, and today I'm thrilled to have Daron Yondem with me. Daron is a multifaceted tech leader, serving as the Azure Application Innovation Tech Lead at Microsoft. With over 2 decades of experience in the tech industry, Daron has been a driving force behind numerous innovations in the Azure ecosystem. Beyond his technical prowess, Daron is deeply committed to personal and professional development. He blends his passion for technology with his dedication to holistic wellness, where he also works as a wellness coach. Today, we'll explore his career, his philosophy on leadership, and his vision for the future of technology and wellness. Daron, a warm welcome to the Builders Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's always weird to listen to your introduction. All of these nice words and, thank you for the beautiful, flattering intro.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining us. But let's introduce you to our listeners better, shall we? How did you get this far in your journey? I mentioned it. You've got an impressive career spanning over 2 decades, right, in tech, including significant roles at Microsoft, contributions to the Azure platform. Can you share the key moments that shaped your path? What came before Microsoft? How did you get where you are today?
So that's a very good question, by the way. Yeah. So I guess if I look at from a very high level, there are 1, 2, 3, and 4 parts. Or partitions in my career. The first one is when I started my own company about 8 years. So the lesson learned, and this is like 20 or 25 years ago or whatever, probably 22-ish. So the lesson out of that, and I grew the company up to 40 people. The lesson that I got out of it is learning delegation. This might sound like very obvious, but that this was because just as a side information, the first company that I started was a company that I started out of high school. So much know about, management or anything like that, just out of the gate. I didn't even know what I was doing was entrepreneurship, to be honest. Back in those days, I wasn't that much aligned with the talk in the ecosystem or whatever. And again, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of, you wouldn't see VCs and stuff on your LinkedIn feed. I'm not sure even LinkedIn feed was something. Anyways, so, oh man, I'm showing off how old I am, right? Anyway, so the first part is that. And I guess the lesson learned out of it is, you have to either pick very good partners, and not necessarily very good isn't the right adjective, but, picking partners is hard. That's maybe the lesson out of it. We started with, I started actually with 4 partners, but at the end of the 8 years, I had no partners at all. So they all went their own ways. We had to part ways. So it's hard to be in a partnership, essentially. So especially if your partners are friends from high school. So that was kind of the 2 lessons learned. Then another 8-9 year of 2 separate startups under the same umbrella of the same holding company. And these 2 startups were all built on Azure. They were both cloud. This is probably like 4 + 8, 12 or 13 years ago. When we started, I'm based in Istanbul. So when we started, Azure wasn't even commercially available in our region.
Right.
So the company was a US company, and we started engineering offices in a couple of places. One was Istanbul, another was Ecuador, another one was obviously the Seattle location, and then we got one in India as well. So the company grew up pretty nicely. So the first startup kind of, I would say it failed. It wasn't the time to market, time in market are critical for a startup to succeed. I bet this again sounds pretty obvious, but even if you have the best technology, you have the best engineering team, you built out the best solution, if that's not the right time for the customer to essentially purchase and use that technology, it simply doesn't work, because at the end of the day, you have to sell what you built, right? So the first startup was essentially a cloud middleware for retailers. We did actually work with the largest retailers in the US, but long story short, it didn't work out. So the lesson learned for me is first, organizational politics is important, and that plays a big role in shaping the deals. Another interesting thing that I've learned is, as a startup, I always think that a startup should be as small as possible. What I mean with that is, you shouldn't simply think that adding more people will add more productivity, and you should increase the productivity per person. That should be your top priority before you start adding more people. I still argue that, by the way. I still support that idea. But then, if as a small startup, and in this case, as a small, let's say 100 people, right? As a 100 people startup, you end up fixing the problem of a 400,000 people company, right? And if the problem you are solving is a very core fundamental problem that they have, there's this perspective of, would a 400,000 people company could accept or rely on a 100 people team? Because they would see the fact that your team is very small, the fact that your organization is very small, is sometimes taken as a clue that it's, at the end of the day, it's a single point of failure, right? Which is another problem. But then your single point of failure, if it is a 5,000 people company, it perceptionally creates more trust, nourishes more trust compared to a 100 people company, right?
Yeah, naturally, in the sense that it's more established, it's had that time to grow.
And all of these dynamics, because I'm coming from a technology background, right? I'm a tech guy. That's where I started, right? And all of these things are learnings that I essentially had to add on top of, hey, this isn't just about tech. And again, right now, this sounds very obvious to me, but this has been my learning and my journey that I had to learn on the way. So the second startup was relatively successful. Let me think. What was the learning out of it? Oh yeah, the learning out of it is that you should never get into the hardware space, because it's painful.
So it was a hardware product. What was there?
It was a mix. It's a digital signage. It's still up and alive. So the company is still functional, by the way, and they still make money. It's a digital signage product, which means all of these, displays might have seen in airports and shopping centers and stuff that shows you the weather or some ads or whatever, right? Or in a retail location, you go into McDonald's and you see the menu on a display, right? A digital display. So those are called digital signage. And obviously there's a hardware that runs that, and there's a system behind that helps the company centrally manage all of these, whatever content that you want to show across all of your stores, right? So that has probably a cloud piece, right? Content management piece, distribution piece, plus a content player piece, plus the hardware. And we were targeting small and medium businesses, but we were delivering the whole package. So we had a headed IoT device that you can connect, essentially $100 IoT device you can get from Amazon, and connect it through HDMI, and it just out of the box, it works. You don't see an operating system. You only see our app. Our app is the only interface that you see functioning with that, interacting with that device. So it was fun. crazy fun, but it's very complicated because the layers, especially when the layers goes down to, firmware management, operating system management and all of that, on all the device hardware certification and all that. So it's crazy. It's very complicated.
Yep.
Ideally, if you offer me like 2 startup ideas, equally profitable or whatever, everything else being equal, one of them is just a web-based whatever, or even okay, I'm even okay with a mobile app, by the way, because a mobile app is another level of problems as well. Purely web is the most beautiful one, to be honest. If you're interacting only on the web, it's the most beautiful. Web and mobile, I'm okay. But when you go into the hardware space, especially if you decide supporting different hardware specs, for example, our app was running on Amazon's Fire Stick as well, on Google Chrome devices as well. So every platform has the different set of devices and specs and so on. So they all have different stores, different distribution models. It's a mess. So the lesson learned is try to stay away from the hardware hardware reliance or dependency, or that complexity, the additional complexity, as much as you can. That's the lesson learned. Then it's Microsoft. So it's been 3 years, I suppose. 3 years. I'm at Microsoft right now, and I'm helping customers to build this type of solutions on Azure, and making sure they get the best out of Azure as possible from a technical perspective.
Fantastic. And it's been 20 years odd that's kind of led you to this role of the last 3 years or so. But there's a lot more that you're doing aside, well, not just within your role, but also aside from your role as well. There's this kind of coaching and everything that goes on there. How did that come about? When did you get into the wellness and the coaching side of things?
Yeah, so it was during the midst of the second startup, I would say, 8 or 9 years ago. I noticed. So first off, the first thing that came in was, hey, we are building out teams that are spread out across multiple continents, and we're managing things in a way out of a gut feeling, like how we feel things should be done is the way that we were doing things. I'm not saying we were in a bad shape, and to be honest, now that I'm looking back, we were doing pretty good from an engineering management perspective, but it wasn't. So, there's this difference between, hey, I've studied computer science and then I go into computer programming, and then that's one path, or you just start and wing it and learn computer programming, and then you start thinking about, hey, did I miss something? So what would happen if I have studied it? Is there something that I'm missing? So that was the feeling that came to me about engineering management and team leadership. So that's the time when I signed up for an organizational leadership master's degree. I was like, okay, I'm going to get into this just part-time and see what's in it. See if there is anything that we can improve. If there's anything, we are missing. See if there's anything we're doing wrong, whatever, right? Look into the literature, essentially. So I could have done it myself manually as well. Someone might ask, why a master's degree? Because it just gives structure. It's just me being lazy, to be honest. It just gives structure. They give you what to read, what to look for, right? All of the clues and keywords and so on and so forth. So during that time, I started noticing that one of the functional pieces that is highly important in engineering management is the one-on-one coaching. And I noticed that was actually something that I was doing, but again, I was doing it out of the way I feel it, right? And not trained for it, right? So I kept that in my back pocket. I finished the master's degree. After the master's degree, I'm currently actually in the thesis process for a doctoral degree on leadership, because leadership is the biggest umbrella on all of this is very interesting to me. The organizational psychology aspect, the organizational development aspect, the human side And again, me coming from technology, being interested on the human side, I'm not sure if that's my age or whatever, but that's a cycle that I'm going through, because I feel like it's not about the tech anymore. So let me fix that sentence. It's not about the tech. The anymore part, I need to drop that. Nothing has changed. I'm the one who's changing and noticing things. Because as a tech person, your inclination is to fix problems by bringing more tech. Wait, sometimes it might look like it works, but that's not the only way. Sometimes that's not the ideal way. That's not the shortest path either. And that doesn't bring the highest return on your whatever investment you're putting forward. So the human aspect is the aspect that I figured in the industry is as well. We are missing it a lot, to be honest. We're most of the time we're trying to focus on the tech and to fix problems. So anyways, let me step back. So the master's degree was done, doctoral and stuff. So meanwhile, I had this idea in the back of my head, like, hey, coaching is something that I am doing, but what if I did get some training? So then that's when I started doing some research, and I'm a lot into, wellness and, sports, and, I finished a year ago or what. I finished 2 marathons, so I wasn't a lot into sports as well. So I was like, okay. I didn't think necessarily just to focus on, health in terms of just the physical health, but the mental health as well. Because when I do coaching, when I talk to people in my engineering team, I don't pick what to focus. It's just I see it as a holistic. It's a life. It's a person. You cannot say like, hey, I'm going to focus on. At least I don't do that as a manager or leader or whatever my position is, as a team lead or whatever it is. So I cannot just say, okay, we're going to talk business right now. That's what my duties, responsibilities are. No, that's an individual that has multiple facets of their life, and you cannot disregard a huge part of it and only focus on one side and then expect results. It's rarely going to happen. You have to take it as a whole. And then I found this health and wellness coaching program. I did some research. It's a certified program in the US. So in the US, they actually have this role. And this is just something new, by the way, during the last 1.5 years. It's even certified as a role in a hospital setting that works, a coach that works with a therapist, right? The therapist works with you, then hands over to the coach, and the coach moves forward the progress type of situation. So I got the training, which was painful for me because it is from a university in the US, which means for about 9 months, I had to wake up every Wednesday at 3 a.m. for actual practice.
Dedication right there.
The class was crazy fun, by the way. But 3 a.m. It was. So I did that 9 months. Then I started, doing coaching outside my that I work with as well. So like I have a page where people can come in and purchase sessions. At first, I was kind of hesitant, to be honest, because in my mind this was like I was positioning this as something that I did to help people.
Right.
But then I figured the reason I was hesitant is because this wasn't my main job. I'm not doing coaching to right. I mean, I have a job that I make money anyways. So first off, thinking that coaching is something that is supposed to be done for free is kind of be taken as offensive for people who actually do that for money, right? Which isn't right. So that my mindset wasn't right. And then I figured, hey, if I do this only for free, if I keep that mindset, I'm not going to be able to do it a lot, to be honest, because I have a limited amount of time that I can use for voluntary stuff. So combining these two, I convinced myself to put myself out there as a coach where you can book paid sessions. And that's been another learning, because I found that it's been very helpful for the people that I work with. I have enjoyed it. And when I saw that it was helpful, right? It was so enjoyable. I had so much fun. So I still do that. Obviously, it's not a full-time thing, but because I enjoy it, I still keep doing it. So that's where it came from and how it shaped into what it is today.
Fantastic. And how would you say, talking about how you kind of lead the team and manage the team at Microsoft now as the innovation tech lead, how would you say that this experience as coaching and obviously the masters that you've been reading, how has this experience in coaching influenced your approach to managing and teams? Can you share any specific strategies or techniques, for example?
Oh, specific strategies and techniques. Okay. So it my approach a lot. So how though? First off, there's this tendency when, this is very similar to the parenting relationship as well. I find it very similar. It's like there are things that that are good for people to do, right? I mean, everyone should, you should do some cardio every day or whatever, right? You should not eat French fries for your health, right? So
not too many, at least.
Not too many. So there are things that we know that are good. If people did that, it's going to be good for them. But then the change process itself has to start from the person. Otherwise, it pretty much never and ever lands. So the acceptance of that wasn't easy for me because of the pressure of, my desire to help.
Right.
My desire to help is pressuring me to tell you what's good for you, which isn't the way to go.
Right.
So that's one thing that has changed in my attitude, right? I don't think I was overdoing it, but I was overdoing it. So I shouldn't be doing it at all, to be honest. And the other thing that I've noticed is reflection is a huge tool. Obviously, I'm going to do a lot of generalizations here, but what I have seen is a lot of the time, people do not give themselves the credit that they have to give. Or simply people, just hearing yourself, is so right. So just these two small things, right? Let people help people, and coaching is pretty much about it. Like, helping people find their way, not sketching them a way that you think is right for them.
Right, exactly. Just helping them reach or kind of tap into their potential.
Yes, and sometimes, especially when in corporate settings, it's a little bit, and I've done this in the past, it's a little bit tough because if you really help people shape their way, that path might not be aligned with the path of the current organization.
Right.
So it might even lead as a manager, right? For a manager, it's much harder, I suppose, because as a manager, you might end up suggesting the person, not suggesting, but you might end up helping the person find their way, which might be leaving the current organization.
Right.
Which is, as a manager, you are told to retain people.
Right.
What circumstances? No one talks about that, right? If that is the best for the person if they believe that's the best, if they figure out that's the best, whatever we're going to say, right? That leaving this X company is the best for them and they have to chase something else, they have to experiment with something else, and you as a manager literally facilitate that through coaching, and you should be able to do that. You should be doing that. And that's where I when I do these, when I talk with friends and leaders, that's where I end up saying people over corporations, people over organizations. People should be more important than the company. And I see the company as somewhere, this includes startups as well. I understand that founders can get very passionate, obviously, but we should forget that, a company for people to work together towards a common goal, towards a goal. Not, I don't see companies, organizations, or corporations as somewhere that, just to financial or to serve the goals of the founder only.
Right.
And the two doesn't have to be separate things. You can align the two. It's just about finding the right people.
Right.
And that's not easy. That's another level of complexity. I'm going off topic here, I suppose.
No, but I think it's actually a little bit related to a question that I was going to give regarding these kind of, the biggest misconceptions about coaching, particularly in kind of these corporate technical environments, because in corporate environments, maybe people are kind of assuming, I don't know, you correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe there's an assumption that, there's this kind of career path or this path kind of drawn out for them. And it's, you got to do A, B, C to get there. Maybe that's not always the way. Would you agree? Is this a common misconception, or are there other kind of misconceptions that you'd bring up when it comes to coaching in particular within these kind of corporate environments?
So I'm kind of trying to connect the corporate environment and the coaching in corporate space. So I believe it has to be disconnected, because we do have that at Microsoft as well. We do have internal coaching, and I'm part of that as a coach. So there's an internal coach pool, let's say, and any employee within Microsoft can actually go and ask for a particular amount of coaching hours per year.
But in these environments, sorry to interrupt, in these environments, this coaching is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this coaching obviously has a goal to help the individual tap into their potential, reach a potential that the company might think they have, all within kind of, the for-profit organization at least, all with a goal for, this ultimately to benefit the organization as well. Is this in itself a misconception
That is okay. What's important is, how does that desire of profiting out of all of the things that we do, how does that materialize as in what we do day to day, or how our coaches coach, right? I mean, for example, as part of the team that I am, this is by the way, a separate, structure, let's say, the coaching program within Microsoft. No one tells me, hey, while they're coaching people, just coach for internal career paths. Or no one tells me, like, during your coaching people, make sure, they stay within or whatever. Like, there is no, additional headline or whatever. It's just coaching, right? Help the person. And that is where the disconnect is, which is healthy, I suppose. Which is harder when you, as a manager, you are doing the coaching, because you, as a manager, you're responsible of retention, performance of the employee at work, right? Your KPIs are in conflict. In my case, because I'm in a coaching pool, the people that I'm coaching are not in my direct, they're maybe in Seattle, they're maybe in Portland, whatever, right? But in your day-to-day relationship with your team members, it's much harder to create that disconnect. So there's a conflict that you have to manage as a manager there.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think another question, just, on the topic of coaching, before we move on to a few kind of leadership management and also some technical questions as well. I think this is kind of based on how prevalent AI is becoming across, business processes, across different aspects of life in general. But do you think that AI could not just play a part in coaching, but replace coaching? Or do you think there's an irreplaceable kind of human element here in the coaching process? What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to give an answer, but I could have changed the function of that from within that sentence. Like, how would AI affect coaching? I can change that to any, and I could answer it the same way. And here's what I'm going to say. There's an experience as a person you have when you are being, let's say, you are the coachee, you're being coached, right? There's an experience. If you start believing, or if you believe that you're getting the same or better experience from AI, then I guess it's replaced. Because when we look at today's AI, so for example, let's talk about the most common one, ChatGPT. ChatGPT talks English, right?
Yep.
Actually, no, it doesn't talk English. It just generates some words that we make sense. So that's our experience that says, hey, this experience that I'm living, like, those words that I'm reading, this is like talking. I call this experience that I'm receiving talking, and that's what I'm going to keep calling it. So at its fundamental level, that's what it is. It's making us live an experience that we have been calling something, being coach or whatever. If we get the same experience, even it's simulated, emulated, what I call it, if it's artificial or organic, right? If that's the same experience for the person, for the coachee, but the question is, how do you calculate that scientifically, which is a whole different discussion. So right now, for example, I'm working on a separate paper where I say, in terms of business decision making and AI being used as business decision making, how does AI, for example, if you ask the same question in Swedish versus in English, and if your question is about a particular decision about a feeling, like a conflict between two employees, and you're asking how to move forward. If you ask that in English versus if you ask that in Swedish, is the answer you get going to be same or different? Probably different. So you can try this. You can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, assume you're, let's go to extreme cultures compared to each other. Assume you're from, New York and studied in Harvard. Here's my question. And then say, assume you are from China or North Korea, and here's my question. The answers will be drastically different. So
it'd be nuanced on the kind of cultural level, essentially. Do you think is that kind of be that nuanced?
Yes, but is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. My point is the complexity. It's going to be highly complex. Hopefully, people using AI today do not trust it fully. That's why, for example, Microsoft, you're going to always Copilot. You will never hear autopilot. It's always Copilot. Making sure that, hey, you have to be on the driver's seat. At least that's the situation. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years on. Who's going to be accountable? There's this discussion about, for example, car self-driving as well. If the car goes into an accident, who is accountable?
Who's accountable, exactly? Who's accountable then for essentially if you've got Microsoft Copilot or whether it's autopilot, like you're saying, who's accountable for what is delivered? Yeah, and I think that's a super interesting point and related to another kind of, this is a related question.
Let me interrupt for you for 5 seconds. One thing that I find really helpful today is, especially for cross-cultural interactions, you can go to ChatGPT and say, so let's say you have a friend you're from Sweden and you have a friend from Pakistan, and your Pakistani friend says something and you kind of feel like that's an interesting choice of words in English. You can take it, go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I have a friend from Pakistan. This is what they said. I'm from Sweden. This is how I'm feeling. What do you think? So it's like asking another friend from Pakistan to give you their 2 cents, because that's literally what you are doing. You're tapping into the knowledge that has been, because that model has been, fed with data from Pakistan culture generated content as well, whatever that is, right? So you can definitely go in and they say, hey, this is what the person said. What do they really mean? And you might get an answer saying, hey, in that culture, this is what they mean. And that's a beautiful help that is not easy to find.
No, it's a really interesting point. I'd love that as well, given the kind of international environment we have also at Proxified, but I mean in most companies now. But talking generally speaking as well, the kind of question before was more kind of based on coaching and stuff like this. But AI's growing influence as well. How do you generally speaking this could kind of impact, or how do you think the concept of work will change? I mean, we can talk about it on a engineers, developers, DevOps engineers, for example, on this kind of in this sphere. What skills do you think in the future will become most valuable? You mentioned, co-pilots versus autopilot, stuff like this. How do you see this sphere being impacted? I know, for example, you've been kind of giving webinars for Proxified on GitHub Copilot as an example. I'm just interested to get your point of view on how, what skills you think will become most valuable for these kind of professions. We're talking, developers, engineers, DevOps, the like.
So first off, no one knows, right? We are predicting the future. At least let's keep as a disclaimer, right? We are predicting the future. Today, the best is to use these tools as much as possible, to invest in automating what you do as whatever your job is, right? Are you a lawyer? You should start using ChatGPT, and they do, by the way. So anyone, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about DevOps people versus front-end people or whatever. So anything that you do, you should learn tools and automate, increase your productivity as much as you can. Moving forward, then the question comes, hey, will some of these roles disappear? For sure. How much? We don't know. And by that I mean maybe these roles will start from low level to high level. At least that's my estimation. Like junior DevOps will disappear first. Mid, senior, and so on and so forth. It will.
But when you
from down to up.
Right, and when you say they will disappear, is it that there's not a need for those specific tasks, or that there's a new role that's created essentially, where it's this kind of symbiosis of human and tool in this case?
So let's jump into an easier example. If you want to write an essay on the high school level, GPT can do it right now. So you don't need high school levels essay writers, if there was a such thing. But when it comes to whatever graduate level or whatever, it's not there yet. So that's what I mean by starting from lower levels to up, because when the senior person needs to accomplish a task that usually is being delegated to a junior, let's say, instead of delegating, they're going to have GPT do that.
Yep.
So we don't know 100% sure that this is going to lead to these roles disappearing. By the way, again, we are predicting the future. Maybe it's just due to productivity increase. We're going to produce more, but we will still need the same amount of people, or even more will be always helpful. We don't know. The more scariest to me is the moment we get to pure AGI level, or human intelligence, or higher end intelligence level, and at that point, it's just going to be a cost issue, right? Is it cheaper to have Daron do it, or is it cheaper to have AI do it? It's going to be an interesting feature for sure. But first of all, I really love a feature where people have the luxury of only do what they want to do, right?
Right.
I'm sure everyone's job. I mean, you might love doing computer programming, but you're not enough your day. There are tasks that you don't enjoy doing. So maybe those are the things that you're not going to do anymore, and that's a nice feature. You're just going to do the things that you love. Maybe you're not going to be paying much, but then maybe the cost of things will lower as well, because instead of humans farming apples, it's going to be all robots or whatever, and Apple will be much cheaper. I don't know, right? That's the feature. The other interesting theory that I have is it might be, okay, here's the thing. You go to the doctor. Let's assume that we have an AGI that is smarter than humans. This might be especially interesting in coaching, to be honest. Do you think, because humans are not rational beings, so
we like to think about.
camping on that truth, I'm going to say, do you think having a real physical human be more expensive than having AI because it's just a privilege? Could there be such a future?
Could be.
Could be. Again, I'm not saying it's rational, because I'm literally telling, hey, I've assumed that AGI is doing a better job than a human in coaching, but still, as a human, you might prefer, hey, I don't want to have this genetically modified apple. I want a homegrown apple. So maybe that's where we're gonna go. I don't know.
It's I think all of are super interesting, because we can kind of help us, but we can't know our rule. And I think we'll touch a little bit upon more AI and related questions in a bit. But I want to get your a little bit your take on leadership, building teams, and particularly how you've been doing it at Microsoft so far in your role. When building a team, what skills and qualities do you prioritize, or what have you been prioritizing at Microsoft? If we were to use kind of a concrete example, what are non-negotiable skills and qualities you look for in a candidate, for example?
Qualities and skills are two massively different things, obviously. So, okay, let me start from the easy one. Skills. That depends to the role, obviously. That's why that question is easy. But the foundational skills are the ability to prioritize and manage time. Communications, obviously, pretty cliche. Adaptability. You can't test this in an interview, by the way. It's very hard. You can only see that once the person has joined the company.
There's going to be a question. How do you evaluate a candidate's kind of ability to
adapt? A lot of the interviews are just, I don't believe in a lot of interviews. They're just trying to make sure, at least this is my personal opinion, right? In interview is like, testing out that just obvious issues you can see. Like, it's just, hey, can you sit properly? That's what I can see in an interview. Because I have failed enough of times to learn that whatever you do in an interview, the person can succeed, but then you would be really surprised day to day that they're not moving forward with that success. And they can have, memorized things, they can have learned a couple of things or whatever, but day-to-day interaction, the in-team interaction, the teamwork is something that is very, very hard to see. And we have tried our best, to be honest. We did things like, having a that was already built, kind of trying to test, like, hey, does the person, when they're being assigned a task, do they first look into the code base, trying to understand how the team works, and then incorporate something into it, or do they just go heads on and come up with their own stuff without even looking into the code base, right? Without even trying to understand the history, or so we did test all of these, but you still, interviews are a very limited, short amount of time of interaction you have with that person, which whatever you do aren't going to be hugely successful. So skills and qualities, again, go back there. Skills, prioritization, communication, time management, and obviously there's going to be specific skills. Like if you're going to be in cloud architect, I'm going to ask some specific questions about it. Can you do you want, where does the borders of your knowledge, where is that? That's what I try to understand. And in every interview, I actually tell the person, like, hey, there's going to be questions that you're not going to be able to answer. Thankfully, I have 20 years of experience, so I'm going to be able to push you there. And the reason I'm pushing you there is just to understand the border, because that's what's important for me. That doesn't mean that you're not a good fit for the role. It just means that, I need to find your border. So qualities, you cannot have those qualities in an interview. But what type, what qualities would I look for in a successful hire? And with a successful hire, I mean someone that we worked more than 6 months. That's what I would, in this context, that's what I would call a successful hire, not necessarily someone that got on their payroll next day.
But do you not think there's the process of candidates, ability to, I don't know, leadership qualities such as, being able to lead changes, or kind of see changes through to a finish, or not only keep up with stuff going on, but also innovate and make these changes, changes through themselves? Do you think this is very, very hard to assess?
It is. I mean, there's interviews I can take you through. I mean, academically proven questionnaires and stuff. You can definitely do any of those. But I guess thinking is for these qualities, for these to show up, actually you have to have the right organizational setting as well. The person might say, hey, I do speak up or whatever, right? I do speak up. I never keep any of my ideas away. I always propose changes. I always push whatever, right? When they're filling the questionnaire, they might fill in all of these values because that's what they believe they do. And the moment they join the organization, based on the team setting, based on the social interactions, they might actually not do any of that. And that's not because of them, they're adapting.
Right.
In this case, it happens a bad thing, but they're actually doing a good thing. They're adapting. If the organization cannot provide the right environment, then all of these qualities either aren't going to show up or they're going to subside by time.
Yep.
But the qualities that I will look for is, being able to speak up, right? I don't with the cliches, to be honest. The honesty, respect type of, the classic stuff are the qualities that we would look for. Those are classic, but those are not easy to find. Respect and adaptability would be really high. And yes, that's my personal, that I feel like this is something personal that is the fact that I put this on a very high value, and this is on top of my list. That's what's personal about me, is that looking for change,
right,
and experimentation. Those are the two values that I value a lot. Look for a change, never for change, always experiment, so that would lead learning. Don't wait just for failure to happen to learn. Make failure happen through experimentation, so that we don't even call that a failure, we call that a learning. Because when you say an experimentation, the result doesn't end up being a failure. The result is always a learning out of an experiment. So, and that's stasis. Again, in my case, in the organizations that I work for, in the teams that I work for, I don't like it. And that's probably, it's not me. And everyone tends to for people like themselves. So I guess that's it.
Right. That bias, right? So I think there are really interesting points you're bringing up there. And a connected question here, again, can be related to your experience, the team that you're managing now at Microsoft and whatever. What do you see as the biggest challenge in finding high quality or top tier developers today, or DevOps engineers? Let's say you were to recruit for such a position next week. What do you think the biggest challenges are in finding such?
So the biggest challenge, and this is a challenge for the interviewee, and I actually kind of give them a warning at the beginning of the interview. It's like, that relates to that border thing that I mentioned. Like, I'm going to take you to where you don't know the answer, but I still get answers. The fact that I don't know is so hard, especially in an interview, even if at the beginning I kind of try to create that environment that it is kind of, you're going to get there. That's my point, right? I'm kind of trying to give you that safety space to say I don't know. But I still hear people say things that they're not sure. Or just they have like the confidence, but they still answer the question. Why? Because one of the things that is very, very important in communication, which is AI, because when you communicate with AI, they always tell you the confidence, at least on an API level. When you're talking with people, you don't hear that their confidence level. It doesn't come through.
Right.
They're always, whatever they say, it always comes through like 100% certainty, because that's how it sounds. I mean, what's the best fruit, that comes out of this country? Everyone is going to have an answer, but they're not going to say that, what, I'm not sure, but, I've ate some apples. They're not going to get, they're not going to leave that white space, like the unknown, right? And that's very important in communication, because otherwise everything comes out like 100% true that leads out to, and the other person takes it as 100% true, which leads to a, bad decision. And then when you decide to trace back, that's where you understand, hey, the person wasn't actually sure. They just heard it one time. They didn't even do that or whatever, right? So instead, I prefer, not answering the question at all, or simply saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question. I can look it up. I've heard this, but I didn't try it myself. Kind of explain the additional information, even if you're going to give me a clue or something, hey, what does 2 + 2 does? Hey, I heard it. Some people told me it's 4. I didn't try it myself. So that is very hard to find, I figured, out of all of the interviews, non-specific to particular, knowledge spaces. But the other thing, and this is specific about my current position and the people that we hire, is, we expect people to be able to talk to customers as well when it's needed.
Yeah.
So that adds a huge another set of expectations in both communication and knowledge space, and the fact that I am doing app innovation, which at Microsoft means app, data, and AI and DevOps, like pretty much the whole spiel, other than data analytics a little bit, data warehousing. What else? Low code, no code is out of it as well, but everything else, and it's hard to people that can cover discussions and around all of that.
Yeah.
But that's a very specific difficulty to the type of profile that we are hiring currently.
I was going to say, is that a specific kind of competence, or is it more down to communication skills, or is it a combination of the two? When you talk about being able to communicate with the clients, right?
Yeah, saying no is hard in front of the customer as well. Because in an interview, the person feels like they have to answer all the questions to pass the interview. That's the pressure, right? I understand that pressure, but that pressure might lead you to give wrong answers and be eliminated, essentially. So in my case, I am expecting the person to really be able to figure out what they really know and what they don't know and what they're not sure about, and be able to communicate that. And that's important in customer discussions as well, because you don't want to lead the customer into the wrong direction by simply giving a wrong suggestion that you weren't sure.
No. I'm also get your take on how, I'm not sure what it's like at Microsoft, but just generally speaking here, like the concept of speed in recruitment, like for certain positions, of course, these can take months to fill. But when looking in the kind of tech landscape at the moment, there's this kind of speed in recruitment that we might not have seen before. How do organizations should kind of balance the need for speed in recruitment with building teams that are effective, cohesive, resilient over the long term, essentially?
It's hard because ideally, this is kind of the same thing with engineering as well, right? Because there's the iron triangle, which means, the different balances of different things. We all know that whatever you do, if you rush, the quality will suffer, right? If you're baking a cake, if you rush, probably the quality will suffer. It's kind of the same with hiring as well. If you rush, if you put a deadline instead of putting a bar on the quality of the candidate that you are looking for, if you prioritize the deadline of hiring, you will end up hiring the person that you find best. You're not going to be 100% sure you might quality bar as well, but then your priority was the timing, right? So in engineering, what we do is, hopefully, if you have a deadline and you're rushing to it, what you should do is to drop features if you're not sure you're able to hit that deadline. Right. If you don't drop features, then you're going to drop non-functional things, which are going to lower your quality. And that happens a lot. That's why sometimes buggy stuff goes out. So how could you then prepare for this as an organization? Is that you're gonna have interns and a cycle of interns all the time for junior roles. This is only you can do for junior roles. You're gonna have a cycle of interns that whenever you need to hire juniors, you know that you can tap into, right? So essentially, you're preparing people not only for yourself, for the ecosystem, but if you keep preparing that, if you have a flow of people, right, the moment you need it, you can get part from that flow, hopefully, right? The same could be said with juniors versus seniors as well, but from a human resource perspective, this requires a very meticulous planning, which rarely happens. And the reason why this doesn't happen is all of these operations, let's assume that you decided to structure everything in a way that when you need a senior employee, right, when you're going to open a senior DevOps role, you will have your junior DevOps person nearly qualified.
Right.
It doesn't have to be exactly qualified. They should stretch nearly qualified to that role so that you can, jump them up.
Is that a luxury afforded, to the bigger organizations, though, that essentially there's this kind of investment in people and roles that they know are coming in the future, that not all companies can do that, right? Some companies are like, look, we need to feel that, we're looking for this person next week. They need to be able to hit the ground running.
I don't think large organizations, at least in my experience, not only at Microsoft, my experience with, as a vendor or from outside as a consultant with other large organizations as well. So my isn't limited to Microsoft, even though it's highly concentrated in Microsoft. But from what I see is things are ideal are much harder to accomplish in larger organizations because the ship is big.
Right.
It's pretty much impossible. In smaller organizations, it's still hard, but in smaller organizations, it's more possible to have those structures. But again, in order to do this, the main problem, other than large and smaller, the main problem is a lot of the time the procurement isn't the right word, obviously. The hiring decision comes from financials. The decision doesn't come from HR. HR say, hey, in order to do this planning, this is what we need, and these are the budgets that we're going to need.
Right.
And then sit down on the whatever C-level decision table, wherever that is. They don't sit down at that decision table and put the financial numbers and say, hey, in order for this organization to keep a healthy blah, blah, blah engineering team, these are the budgets that we need. Instead, what happens is, when these budgets are being planned, HR is not on the table at all.
Right.
The budget gets planned and then handed over to HR. And HR tries to do whatever they can do with those. Right. There's no help given, pretty much. It's just next fiscal year, we're going to hire 50 people.
Right.
And
so, that's when these people, in whatever role it is, whatever organization, there's a integrating those members into a new team. I want to get your take on this as well. So what strategies do you use to integrate new team members into an existing team? We have to ensure typically that they can quickly end with the whatever established culture, whatever goals that team might have. What are yours for integrating new team members?
I don't see them as team members. I see them as, I know this is again sound cliche, but I see them as people that we're going to work like 8 hours a day for the rest of freaking our life. Just people. Hopefully friends. One of the things that I'm really finding interesting is, especially after moving out of the startup space, again, I'm generalizing, but this is my experience, is my strategy is to have as much fun as possible with the team.
Right.
While we do work. Obviously, my strategy and the way I want to work in this case doesn't mean that I should force this in a, everyone is supposed to work like me.
Right.
No, that's not it. And everyone is, for example, let me give an example. So in my views, no, I do respect working hours. I do respect weekdays and weekends. But I'm okay having, 1 hour off during the day or whatever, doing, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but having a coffee chat for an hour during the day and then, working during the weekend or, meeting with after work on planning something on planning during the week or whatever. I take this as life. We have responsibilities at work. We have things that we have to deliver. But at the end of the day, this is life. And we can be flexible around it, right? So, but there are, I know, people I shouldn't act work the way I work, but then you should have some expectation as well as your culture. Adaptability and, inclusivity of new team members goes as far as there's a limit to that, right? So, for example, if you're expecting people to be flexible, you cannot be inclusive and say, hey, we're okay with people that are inflexible.
Right.
No, we are not. That was our value, right? That goes as far as that there's a limit to that. So I guess my strategy in this case is just being authentic and being as welcoming as possible, giving time to the person to live the culture that we have in the team and decide if they want to be part of it or not. They might want to change the culture, and that's perfectly fine, but they have to take their time. And that is part of a potential discussion, if it comes up, a potential discussion of the manager versus employee in a coaching session. Right. So if there's something that you don't like about the company's way of doing things, you should be able to speak up and not stay back just because this has been the way things have been done in this organization for 50 years. And that's part of the culture. That's not what I mean when, everything should still be open to discussion. That's what's important. And maybe that's part of the cultural piece that I would like to every member that joins the team understand first. Like everything can be put on the table. And we can talk, and we will keep talking. Unless we figure out a way to move forward.
No, that point was very, very interesting. And kind of listening to your do you like kind of onboarding checklists, for example? If you're onboarded to a new role in a new team, do you think that they can be kind of very helpful? Or
I will answer that, but before that, let me tell you one thing about the previous one, because I feel like that might all sound like too much effort, which it is. All of that I'm saying requires too much effort and too much time. I never rush onboarding in terms of the official onboarding and the cultural onboarding or whatever. I never rush things. There's no reason to rush an employee's, and you and all them, whatever. Those discussions should never be rushed because change takes time. You cannot speed up change and evolution. You cannot put gallons of water on a tree and hope that it's going to grow faster. It's not going to happen. So back to your checklist. Do I like it? Yeah, I do like checklists overall, because they help us not to forget things and have a proper, structure, but they need to be highly flexible. So the person doing the checklist, there should be a way. Again, this is the manager-employee relationship, but and if the checklist is being given by higher level leadership where the feedback loop isn't connected, the feedback loop for that checklist from the person who does the checklist has to be very tight and close. So, because I've seen this a lot, especially with Microsoft, to be honest, there's an onboarding checklist, the person goes through it, a couple of links doesn't work, no one fixes them, they just go through it, whatever. So, I mean, it's still helpful, but it's not ideal, right? So the person in the checklist, when they see a broken link, they should be able to fix that. They should be, having that discussion. The manager should, that type of thing. And the checklist should be a list that gets improved with every employee getting onboarded. So you should say like, hey, during my onboarding, I did this checklist, but if we edit this, it would be helpful for the next person who gets onboarded, or maybe this doesn't make sense. So that discussion should be taken seriously for every checklist.
No,
if you do that, checklists are good.
No, I like them, particularly kind of onboarding checklists. I mean, I don't think they're the only way of integrating a new member, don't get me wrong, but I think they can be really, really helpful. A few, wary of time here as well, just a few kind of, I'd like to just ask a few questions related to kind of Microsoft Azure as a platform and kind of, technical questions, future plans, if they're, what they might be. Naturally, like there's been a lot happening in tech landscape in general, kind of AI explosion and everything. But what new services do you think, or do you believe will be kind of critical for Azure to develop in order to kind of stay ahead of emerging trends and customer needs. There must have been a lot happening, a lot of change in this sense.
In the context of Azure, you ask?
Yeah. What are you? Yeah, what they're doing essentially.
I believe most critical, which is what the company is investing a lot recently, is to make those various models of LLMs available within a single environment.
Right.
Because the feature isn't going to be a feature, at least currently, that's how it's like. It's not going to be a feature where you're going to just select a single model and move forward with it.
Right.
You're going to be using multiple different models from multiple different vendors and having the ability to make them available where the application lives is important due to simple, latency and security are the simplest two. So, because when you come, okay, let's even talk about Google or AWS. I'm just gonna some examples right now. So you go to AWS and you say like, hey, I want to use GPT-4. This is a real example. So I'm going to use GPT-4, and GPT-4 isn't available because in this case, Microsoft is lucky to have that permission to run the GPT-4 models within Azure.
Right.
So that's an advantage. If your application within Azure, you're going to have direct access to the model. The model will be deployed for you in an isolated environment. So that's an advantage.
Yep.
But then you want to use, Mistral. Can I deploy that to Azure as well? And that's what the company is investing a lot to enable that. You come into Azure ML Studio, you pick the models from various vendors, whatever you want. You bring those in. That helps experimenting with things. That helps going to production with solutions that incorporate multiple models. That's one area that's very heavily invested. Obviously, there are small language models, SLMs, that Microsoft is investing a lot too. That's going to be very interesting. The other aspect that's going to be interesting is it's not just Microsoft that is investing into this, is the MPU stuff. So the latest Surface devices that Microsoft has, they actually have NPU, neural processing unit,
right,
like a CPU and a GPU. They have an NPU on the laptop as well, which is gonna be very interesting. In a couple of years, my guess is, in a couple of years, we are gonna have today's GPT-4o level or even better models running totally locally on our devices,
right,
offline.
Yeah,
that's gonna change the entire game, because once it's local, and they're just during the recent Copilot announcement, they have actually shown that people might have seen that GPT-4 is watching your screen, right? And then helping you out based on what it sees on your screen. And people were worried a little bit about hey, this is a public mode, not necessarily public, but this is a remote model. Let's say this is not local, and so on and so forth. There are valid and invalid concerns, but whatever. But at one point, if you have the model running locally, then, and I'm not sure if I did this demo in our Proxified prompt engineering session. I think I didn't. But anyways, there's I believe it's called self-operating computer on GitHub. They can look for it. There's a GitHub open source. It's an open source project. It uses GPT-4 right now. You can give you the control of your desktop, your mouse, and your keyboard. And then you give instructions. It watches your screen and is able to control your mouse and keyboard as well, which means you can say things like, hey, open Microsoft Word and write an essay, write a, whatever.
Right.
And it looks into your screen, finds figures out what to do next.
Yeah.
Clicks to start, writes Word, searches for it, finds Word, opens up Word, writes step by step. So it's crazy slow right now, but it's going to get faster, obviously.
Right. And what did you say it was called? Just repeat for the listeners.
Self-operating computer.
Yeah.
On GitHub, the repo. So, and that's going to change the way we interact with computers.
Yeah, it sounds
totally.
It sounds. I think what I guess a lot of people would kind of think about when there was kind of like this thing has control of my computer, kind of privacy, security, and whatnot. You mentioned latency and security as a couple of factors as well. When it comes to security, I'm interested as well. I think I looked at a report that's showing like 87% of enterprises adopting these kind of multi-cloud strategies. Microsoft Azure kind of being used by a lot of them as well. What are some of the most advanced kind of security features or practices that Azure is implementing to kind of protect sensitive data and ensure? I mean, there must be a lot of kind of compliance tape across the different industries, right?
So, from a security perspective, the advantage of Azure is, especially in those GPT-4 models and OpenAI models, is the fact that you can actually have it isolated into your environment. Right. The models are not the models hosted by OpenAI. The Azure OpenAI, the models hosted are by Microsoft, so that kind of makes sure that nothing out of your isolated world will ever go out to OpenAI, the OpenAI in this case. Yeah. So that gives you kind of some peace of mind, I suppose. A lot of the security discussions, like the one that we've discussed, like sharing your screen and keyboard access and mouse, they are actually not security discussions. I see them as a trust discussion. Because let's say you have, in my case, I have Camtasia installed on my machine to screen record, right? So I'm giving permission to record my screen, but I know that the recording is going to stay locally. How do I know that? Because I trust Camtasia. I don't necessarily, and I personally do monitor my network traffic, but not everyone monitors their network traffic, right? What if Camtasia is, streaming that video behind the scenes to their own servers? I mean, they're not doing this, but do I know for sure? Does anyone know for sure? No, they don't test this out. They just trust Camtasia, right? Yeah. So that is, there is going to be a point. It's, for example, the fact we're putting our corporate data on ChatGPT. Is it compliant? That's a legal discussion. From a legal discussion perspective, if the agreement between the service you're getting from ChatGPT versus your company is in place, then there's no issue. Right. Which means this wasn't a security thing. Right. On the lower levels, yes, there are security concerns and so on, so things that we have to, but on the higher level, it's that legal, trust relationship between those two entities. Because this, 10 or 15 years ago, there was even discussions about, hey, we're putting our app in AWS on, AWS's server. They could be doing some crazy stuff about our app. They could be stealing our data, and we're not going to put our, apps into cloud vendors. And you know what? If things didn't change, this is again an old story, but I guess it was Walgreens in the US. Again, this is an old story. This might not be true right now, but 10 years ago, I remember hearing stories like Walgreens not putting their apps on AWS because AWS is owned by Amazon, which is a retailer. Right. And they to Azure. Right. So I don't know what the backing reason was, but these things were not necessarily discussions. Those are trust discussions. The moment you trust the app that you're running on your PC, you will use it, and that there is going to be, with every trust relationship, there's a risk taking. Right. And that risk taking will have balanced by what you take out of it, because there's a risk, and the reason you take that risk is you get something out of it. Yeah. So if you get very crazy high productivity, then your appetite for risk can increase a little bit as well. And meanwhile, your trust relationship will get better too. So I guess we get used to it as well. So it's going to be really interesting, because the moment you figure out, like, I want to buy a ticket from, Istanbul to Seattle for tomorrow, 8 a.m., find me the cheapest flights. The moment my computer is able to open up multiple browser tabs, automated, look into multiple even a single airline. Yeah. Opening up the site, filling out the fields, and clicking the button, searching and finding the person who is the user of that website. Yeah. it's not me anymore, it's AI.
Mhm.
And that's going to even affect how websites are designed, how user interfaces on computers are designed, because the users are not going to be people anymore. It's going to be AI. It's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Yeah, me too as well. And I think another kind of question here related to kind of like to this area at least. I mean, my knowledge here is far more kind of superficial compared to yours naturally, I think. But I'd like to get your kind of take on the kind of edge computing versus cloud computing as well, kind of like the differences between the two. I mean, as far as I'm aware, you have kind of edge computing processing local data, like in the closest, let's say, decentralized server, right? Whilst cloud computing is doing that on a fully managed kind of centralized one. What challenges and opportunities do you foresee in this space? Microsoft Azure is naturally, offering products in both, right? But what do you agree? There's a kind of shift towards that kind of edge computing, or has been? What's your view here?
Man, this discussion has been like 10 years now. There's always that question is, the question is mostly about, is this going to be centralized or distributed? That's what it is.
Right.
I mean, obviously there are more about edge computing, like, the latency, and there's the legalities aspect as well, which I will talk about. But the previous example that we were talking about, like having a model running on your own locally, is actually a model of edge computing. It's right. You are the edge in the case, and it's working on your machine. So when it comes to machine learning models, a lot of what's happening today is through SLMs, because SLMs are the only ones that you're able to run at the edge, because the edge doesn't have the compute power as the central location. And that's why at the edge location, you kind of prefer running SLMs. MPUs will be something interesting in data centers, because if you have the MPUs at the edge, the models that you can run are going to be different.
Okay.
This is very rare right now. We don't have a lot of that right now. But this might be another approach. Another difficulty of edge computing is, again, the capabilities that and the power you get from edge versus the central model are different. Besides latency, one of the reasons customers fall to the edge is they don't want the data to go out to a particular territory, region.
Right.
Like you're in Germany, you don't want your data to go into the US data center. I mean, there's a German data center, but in the case of Middle East, for example, you're somewhere in Nigeria, there's a data center in Nigeria. So if you're not pushing your data to the nearest data center, that you might want to have an edge location.
Yep.
I guess we will see equal capabilities. We will always call the edge an edge. There's a reason we're calling the edge, right? It's not just physically it's closer, just latency is lower. It's just because the power, the work that we have at the edge is always smaller than the central location. Maybe one day, I wouldn't be surprised if this is equal to the client server discussion as well. Like, should we do it on the client or should we do it on the server? Maybe one day. So today, a lot of our new needs, right, are being served by the centralized infrastructure. Maybe in the future, it's going to be more at the edge, unless we need more power. We get larger models. So this exact same discussion about happened and still happening about gaming. So do you game on your PC or do you game in the cloud and stream the screen? And there's game streaming services. Which one do you want to do? There are advantages and disadvantages of both.
So a good example as well, I think, at the end there. A trend, or not to call it a shift, a trend rather, to kind of keep our eye on. But I'd like to kind of hit you with one last question. If you could implement one groundbreaking AI solution tomorrow, what problem would you solve and why?
Oh, tackling with my
You can
mugs.
take your time.
No, that's easy. So I am finding myself, oh man, I am so lazy. That's why I'm a developer. I would appreciate if today I'm doing a lot of back and forth between multiple systems when I'm using AI.
Right.
I would appreciate a more generic, a more powerful AI. Yeah, I would go generic and go into the self-operating computer that I've discussed. I will continue investing into it because short term there are a lot of wins and value of doing specific things. For example, I mean, you can build something, an add-on or whatever. That's what Microsoft is doing as well. That's what Google did as well. Like in Gmail, you get AI that helps you with your mail writing. Mm-hmm. But that's a very narrow, functional space. I don't want to limit there. Obviously, when you limit the scope, it's easier to get something functional out there in a shorter amount of time and quicker win.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I wish someone was monitoring my emails and telling me, even responding to emails on my behalf, or writing some draft emails that I can read and send. So essentially integration of all the tools that I'm using, and an orchestrator AI actually integrate a lot of this. And I guess we will get there with multi-agent systems, which is what a lot of companies are investing nowadays. It's going to happen.
Yeah. It'd essentially be your kind of, touched upon kind of co-pilot for developers and like this, but this would essentially be like a co-pilot / autopilot for a lot of the kind of the dailies that you do, right?
That would be lovely.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
I agree. Yeah, I believe so as well. I'm excited for that future, I must say.
We're all gonna be managers in the sense that
right.
Even if today you don't have any employees or you don't have any reports, you will have AI employees.
Yep.
So everyone is gonna be a manager in the sense that they're gonna orchestrator. Let's say maybe orchestrator is a better word. Everyone is gonna be an orchestrator. Even as a single developer today, at the edge of organizational chart, right?
Yeah.
They don't have any reports or whatever.
Yeah.
They can obviously, but they will be orchestrating multiple AI agents to get their job done instead of doing the actual task. And that orchestration will obviously require a domain knowledge about computer programming as well, because at the end of the day, you want the thing to be done properly, and you're going to give the right instructions and so on and so forth. That's what I see happening in the short term.
A really, really, really interesting point. And this, I think, leads me to. But before I do, is there anything you'd like to add?
Wow, this was really a fun discussion. I think that the questions, I'm not sure if how many of those are prepped, I don't know, but the scope spectrum of the topics covered throughout the questions that you had, it's beautiful. It didn't leave anything out.
No, I think I have areas that I want to cover. I try to kind of make it as broad as possible. Sometimes it can be nice to kind of zone in, but it's nice to kind of have that breadth as well. But thanks.
Yeah, I mean, one thing for managers or people who have influence over other people who want to build influence, I would say focus on the human connection. I know we are very tech heavy, especially coming from that background, and we tend to like, hey, there's something new to learn and so on and so forth, and there is always time needed to spend on those, but the human connection is usually overshadowed by the tech, and I bet it's going to be more and more important. There's a lot of discussion in the in this space into hey, the next, again, this is future predictions, but in the next era, in the next decade, what's going to be more valuable is social sciences and humanities instead of things that we at least hear on the developer and tax. I don't know if that's going to be real or not, but I believe it's hugely helpful, and that's what I would suggest everyone to focus, either they're a current manager or a future manager. Just make sure you guys are having fun. That's the most in my view. I mean, if you're having fun, if that's a nice team that you have, if you're enjoying, there is literally more probability then you will hit your KPIs as well.
No, very, very well put, Daron. And that brings me to the end of an insightful episode of Builders. Let me say thank you so much to you, Daron, for joining us today, sharing your valuable,
thank you for having me.
Valuable insights. Thank you for joining us. For our listeners, I hope you found this discussion as interesting and engaging as I have. And please don't forget to subscribe to Builders on your favorite podcast platform to stay up to date with our latest and greatest episodes. Thank you for listening, and remember, keep innovating and keep building. We'll see you next time. Bye.